Uh, we will be now looking at the book of Nehemiah, because that will be the subject that we are studying for the next Bible quiz. Okay. So during the next couple of weeks, and whoever can take on this subject, different aspects from the book of Nehemiah, it will be good. So we will just make a beginning today. I'll just share the screen. Not many slides are there, but a little bit I've been able to prepare. So I'll just share that. And we will try to learn from chapter 1 and chapter 2 today very briefly. Okay. So when we think of Nehemiah, one of the things that comes to our mind is the fact that Nehemiah built. Okay, he is remembered for the walls that he constructed by motivating the exiles who had returned to Jerusalem from Babylon, and he motivated them to build a wall around the city. Okay, and the city also was rebuilt during his time, and he served as governor for a long period in the city of Jerusalem. And we are going to take a look at his life, his character, and as we move through the several chapters in this book, we will try to understand the important role that he played in the lives of God's people. And through those lessons, we will be applying it to our own life to see where we are lacking or where we need to change. Okay. Why are walls important? Okay. On the screen, you can see what is called as the Great Wall of China, isn't it? Maybe you can just unmute yourself, and anyone would like to tell us why walls are important?
For protection.
For protection, then?
Separation.
What is that, brother?
Separation.
Separation, yes, for separation, for protection. Anyone else? It will help if we keep talking so that we are able to participate together. Okay. Anyway, the wall that you see is 20,000 kilometers long. It's called the Great Wall of China. Okay. Like brother said, it is one reason why walls are there is for protection. We have walls in our house. It gives our identity. Okay. What is inside the wall belongs to us. Okay, it gives a sense of identity and belonging. It sets the boundaries, okay, what is mine and what is somebody else's. And like brother said, it also talks about separation. Okay, it gives a distinction between what is ours and what is not ours. Okay, and for Jeremiah, the wall of Jerusalem was very important. Okay, why do you think the wall was important to Jeremiah? Because the entire book of Jeremiah is devoted to building the wall and the restoration of the city. Okay, now just I'm asking the question. So if anyone would like to add, why do you think the wall was important to Jeremiah?
Uncle Nehemiah.
Sorry, yeah, to Nehemiah. What was the importance of the wall of Jerusalem to Nehemiah? Why did he give so much importance?
That separation had gone, it had diminished, the separation between God's people and the common man. That was diminishing in time.
Okay. When the Babylonians and the Assyrians had taken the northern and the southern kingdom of Israel into captivity, the local population was replaced by non-Jews. Okay, so when the exiles returned to Jerusalem and the surrounding areas of Judah, there was no separation between them and the local people now, those who are locals now. God had given them this land, but somebody else was occupying it. Their unique identity was gone. Okay. Their kids were not protected from the influence of pagan religions. Okay. And the influence of other people. And when we saw in the book of Ezra, when Ezra returned, that was about 12 years before this, when he returned, lot of Jews had mingled and married with the neighboring people, and they had lost their unique identity. Even children were born out of this mixed marriage. So a lot of struggle which Ezra had after he landed was first to make these people unique. Okay, and so in the last chapter of Ezra, we find that a lot of steps are taken so that the Jews and the others are separated. Okay, so for Nehemiah, the walls not being present allowed people from outside to come and settle in their midst, and as a result, some of their children got married with people who were not Jews, and also the total identity which God wanted to be preserved among them was lost. Okay, so for Nehemiah, the wall of Jerusalem was important. Ezra had taken the painful step of cutting off and severing alliances which were not made in the right way. Okay, and it was a painful process. In order that this does not repeat again, Nehemiah was burdened by God to build the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, we have seen this, but it's important for us to remember because this is a crucial time of history in Israel. Most of the Old Testament books are written in this period. In 606 BC, Daniel was taken captive along with the first set of captives to Babylon. 597 BC, Nebuchadnezzar raided Jerusalem again, and Ezekiel and a lot of captives were gone. And in 587 BC, the temple and Jerusalem were destroyed. They were burnt. Okay, and the walls were raised, and that was the end of the Jewish identity. Then when they returned, 538 BC, Zerubbabel and Joshua. Then 458 BC, we have seen the previous months, we have been studying about Ezra. And now around 444 BC, Nehemiah. Okay, so this is the placement of the book of Nehemiah. The Jews went captive, the Jews started returning in 3 phases. And this is the last and final phase of their return, around 444 BC. Okay, this year 444, I am putting it again in bold type so that you will remember it. Okay, this is a very vital and crucial year in the history of the Jews. And Nehemiah is like a fulcrum or a trigger for the unfolding of events that took place in Jewish history after this. Okay, for people who love history, for people who love timelines, okay, this is a very crucial point in God's calendar. God asked it to be marked, and from this day on, people would be able to count and exactly know when our Lord Jesus will be on the earth, what will be the state of Jewish history, and the timelines up to the end. Everything is there. So 444, very easy number to hear, 444 BC, the time when Nehemiah lived, okay, and started moving towards Jerusalem. The narrative is set in what is modern day Iran, okay. Even Ezra started in Iran, and the place where Nehemiah is found, starting in this narrative, is in Iran. Okay, the Persian Empire was ruling at that time, and that is another thing that we need to remember. The Babylonians were gone, and the Persians were ruling. Okay, today Iran is not favorably supporting Israel. It is very much opposed to it. But in those days, many of their emperors took steps to support the work of God among the Jews, in especially ensuring that they returned back into Jerusalem and Judah. Artaxerxes, the king, was the one who ruled, and from the palace in Susa, what you see on the right in the picture is a palace in Susa. Okay, it's a large one. The picture, it looks small, but it goes way beyond as well. Okay, the Greeks were becoming a powerful nation somewhere towards the west. Okay, and they were coming in direct conflict with the Persians. But it will be another 120 years after this, around 330 BC, that Alexander the Great would invade Persia and defeat it. So another 120 years, the Persians will be ruling, and the Bible would have already fallen silent. The Old Testament was finished with being written around 400 BC, another 40 years from the time when Nehemiah left from Babylon to come to Jerusalem. The prophetic writings became silent. Okay, so this is the beginning and a very crucial period in the history of the Jews. Okay, and what you see in green is what was the Persian Empire at the time of Nehemiah. On the rightmost corner towards the center, that is the tip of India. Okay, right up to India, the Persians had spread from Egypt to India and Turkey and all that. It was the largest empire at that time, much bigger than the Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian Empire that had gone before that, or even the Egyptian Empire that was there. Okay, this was the largest empire ruling at that time. There are many events that are timed in the book of Nehemiah and Ezra, and we can calculate things. The reason why these dates and timings and places are mentioned and names of kings, so that we can understand the chronological sequence and the times that are mentioned. Okay, in Ezra chapter 7 verse 8, we were told that Ezra reached Jerusalem in the 7th year of King Artaxerxes. In the book of Nehemiah, it begins in the 20th year of Artaxerxes, in the month of Kislev. Okay, the month of Kislev is November, December of our modern calendar. Okay, in verse 1 of chapter 1, we are told it is the 20th year of Artaxerxes. So a simple calculation will tell you that about 13 years had lapsed since Ezra had reached Jerusalem. Okay, so God had stirred Ezra, and God had supported Ezra by stirring the heart of the emperor, not only to give funds, but also to make his officials to contribute and the people of Persia to contribute. He had given tax exemptions to the priests. Okay, and he had offered the Trans-Euphrates taxes collected in that region also to be used for the building of the temple. Okay, and in the finishing of that work. And now more than 13 years had gone, and God was moving the heart of another man called Nehemiah. Okay, Nehemiah, we are told, was cupbearer to the king or Artaxerxes, that you will find in the end of chapter 1. I was cupbearer to the king. Okay, so he was the steward. Perhaps he would have had to also taste the king's food, okay, to ensure that it was not poisoned by someone who was an enemy to the king. And so he would have been a very trusted person for the king. And he might have had a very pleasant personality, because in chapter 2, when his face becomes sad as he approaches the king notices it. Never ever before, according to Nehemiah, he had been sad in the presence of the king. Okay, and his sadness was visible to the king. So he must have been naturally pleasant and cheerful person, and was chosen to be a cupbearer, someone who took food and drinks to the emperor when he needed it. Okay, key thoughts from chapter 1 and 2. That is what we are going to look at today. Okay, chapter 1 verse 2 tells that Hanani, one of his brothers, came from Judah with some other men, and I questioned them about the Jewish remnant that had survived the exile, and also about Jerusalem. So his brother visits Babylon, where he is serving under Artaxerxes, and immediately Nehemiah is burdened to ask his brother two things. One is the condition of the people, and the second thing, the condition of the city. Okay, here and there the news must have been coming to him anyway, because he was in the palace, and the king would have been getting a continuous source of information, and that would have been available in the king's palace, and would have been in the news within the palace. So a lot he would have known, but when his brother came, he wanted to know firsthand about these two things. One was about the people who had returned, about how they were, and the second thing was about the city itself. Okay, and this is the news that he is given by his brother. They said to me, those who survived the exile and are back in the province are in great trouble and disgrace, and the wall of Jerusalem is broken down and its gates have been burnt with fire. Okay, so the news he received was related to the condition of the people and the condition of the city. Okay, both were bad. The people were in distress and in grief, and also the city was still in ruins. As we had seen in the book of Ezra, under great difficulty, they had first built the altar, restored the relationship with God. They had started constructing the temple. There was severe opposition, and after almost 17, 18 years of struggle, they finally completed the temple. Okay, and people of that time wept and cried because it had no it was not comparable with the temple that Solomon had built. Some of those who had seen it when they were children. Okay, but there are two thoughts that I want to leave with you. Okay, we love gossip. Okay, it is natural to all of us. Sometime later, if time permits, today or some other later day, we will be looking at this very important subject, because it is something that all of us are guilty of sinning. It comes naturally to us to gossip and to slander and to do wrong things with our tongue. Okay, and of course, when Hanani came there, there would have been plenty of things to gossip about. There were many priests, there were many prominent Jews whose children had married foreign wives. Okay, that is what the book of Ezra says. Okay, and if a news like that comes to us, how would we handle it? Would we become carriers of news like this? Okay, then somewhere it crosses the border or borderline between being an item shared by concern and becoming gossip. Okay, and the person receiving and the response that he gives also distinguishes it, because gossip as such is something that a person shares with someone else, some kind of news or information. Okay, so that first people will look at him as someone who has got plenty of news, and second thing, it is always something juicy about someone else. It has no consideration about the feelings or the devastating impact it can have on the other person. Okay, it is shared purely from a motive to tickle the listener and to give a feeling of I know a lot and you can also enjoy it, and it gives a kind of this thing. How can you know something is gossip when you will not talk this particular subject when that other individual is there? For instance, if I am telling Brother Shaji something about Linson, okay, pardon me for using your names. There is nothing to do with it. That's why I'm using my personal example. Okay, if I'm telling something about Linson to Brother Shaji, okay, and this something I will not tell him if Linson was there, then that is gossip. Okay, if I am telling Brother Shaji something which I will feel comfortable telling Brother Shaji, even if Linson was there, then that is not gossip. Okay, gossip is usually something shared in the absence of that individual with the pure desire to tickle the ears of the other person who is listening. And the Bible has to say a lot of things about this subject of gossip, how dangerous it is, and how it leads to ruin of people, ruin of friendships, and it destroys whole communities as well. Okay, but here what was transpiring between Hanani and Nehemiah is not gossip. Hanani does not talk about which leader, which priest, which nobleman, which commoner, okay, whose son or daughter married a foreigner, okay. That's not the kind of news, but he is talking about how, in general, the Jews are in distress and they are in great trouble and disgrace. And also the fact that Jerusalem's walls are down, and so people from the surrounding areas are also settled among the people of Israel. Okay, so that is the news. So Nehemiah's mind is captivated with the thought about how Jerusalem would be and what struggles will be going on. Nehemiah's reaction is given in chapter 1, verse 4. When I heard, okay, again, this first person talk, I heard, okay, it is Nehemiah writing. So we know that this portion, even though the book of Ezra, Nehemiah is a single book in the Bible, we have seen in the old Bibles, okay, and not in the English translations, but in the Jewish books. But this first person writing indicates that this portion of this book is written by Nehemiah himself. When I heard these things, I sat down and wept. Okay, and for some days I mourned and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. Okay, how can you know that you are not gossiping? When the giver of the news is giving news to a person who is going to not pray, not feel burdened, not feel sensitive to the matter, not feel like weeping over what he has heard. Okay, when you are sharing the news with a person like that, then you can be sure that you are gossiping. Even for the person who is listening, okay, receiving the news, if he is not the person who will then, after hearing the news, he would not sit down, weep, mourn, and fast and pray for a long period of time, this says, before the God of heaven, then you are not worthy of hearing such news. Okay, now you may just be becoming the garbage can of the church, where you're getting a lot of juicy information, and there is nothing of spiritual contribution you are going to make. A person who is burdened like Nehemiah will weep, mourn, bow before God, pray for that need, and as we see in the rest of chapter 1 and 2, do something about it. It costed Nehemiah a lot of money. It costed him a lot of time. He had to make a lot of enemies to do what was right. And it became a lifetime responsibility that he undertook to do from that day on because of the news that he got. Okay, so we know that Nehemiah and Hanani were not gossiping, because the end product of that conversation was something that glorified God and worked towards the building of the people of God in a new direction, channeling them, bringing about a situation where they would not deteriorate, but they would be drawn close to God. Okay, that is how you can distinguish. Okay, this is some thoughts that were there. So there are three prayers that are mentioned in chapter 1 and 2. The first one was in verse 4, then verse 5 on to the end of that chapter 1 is his second prayer. Okay, that is a single prayer that he is praying. And the third prayer is mentioned in verse 4 of chapter 2, okay, where it is a prayer that was just what you can say an arrow prayer, like something a short immediate on spur of the moment, a very brief, a spontaneous 1 second type of a prayer. Okay, so by looking at Nehemiah, there were three kinds of prayers that we can see. In chapter 1 verse 4, it's a long period of time that he is praying. I said the timings are very important. Okay, so in the month of Kislev, he gets the news and starts praying. Chapter 2 begins in the month of Nisan, that is in March and November, November of our modern day calendar. So in other words, his prayer spanned for a period of 4 months. Okay, the burden of news that is received when it stirs and motivates a person to pray sustained in a sustained manner for such a long period of time, then you can be sure that he is not into gossiping, but doing what is necessary. Okay, so his first prayer that is mentioned in verse 4 spans 4 months, and the long prayer that is there in verse 5 to the end of chapter 1 is the prayer that he makes at the close of those 4 months. Okay, he's been praying, he is burdened, he is praying for the walls, he's praying for the city, and he is praying for the disgrace in which the people are in. He is burdened that people are mingling and the communities are not maintaining their separation and identity, and there is no protection for the Jews. And after this 4 months, he has this long prayer. Very times when we are in public, we like to make long prayers. When we are in private, our prayer life is shallow and sometimes not even present. It is absent. Okay, so our Lord, when he taught in the Sermon on the Mount, he spoke about this kind of long prayers which the Pharisees used to make in public prayers, okay, where the prayer was not aimed at God, but it was aimed at the listeners to their prayer. Okay, so if you have a habit of long prayers in public and very brief or non-existent prayer life in private, then you need to be alarmed. Okay, the right balance you can see in the life of Nehemiah. His prayer life was sustained. Every day he prayed for that need till the resolution came, and in private he had this long prayer. And then when he actually comes before the king and suddenly things start rolling, then not in desperation, but he connects with God in a brief, in a flash, in a second, and he prays to God and answers the king. Okay, the king has asked a question and his answer cannot be much far. Okay, so you can just imagine how brief that prayer would have been, but he did that. So these three prayers were there, and all these prayers are taken in that same year that I talked about, 444 BC. Remember that year, even if you forget many other things. It was the day of goosebumps, okay? Because after he finishes the prayer, okay, it says, just see the last verse 11, isn't it? Yeah, verse 11. Lord, let your ears be attentive to the prayer of this your servant and to the prayer of your servants who delight in revering your name. Give your servant success today by granting him favor in the presence of this man. Okay? He is praying in private, but today, this particular day in the year 444 BC, Nehemiah is precipitating an event. Okay, he's been praying long, he's been burdened, and he says, today, okay, there is an eager anticipation. He is asking God to do something today as I go to work. Okay, remember, just after this, he is entering the king's palace. So this is a prayer that he prays early in the morning before going to his job. Okay, do we pray for our colleagues? Do we pray for the work that we are undertaking to do in the office the way Nehemiah did? Okay, so he prayed that something should happen, and something happened on that day. Okay, we will later on study the content of his prayer, but not today. Okay, so when in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when wine was brought for him, I took the wine and gave it to the king. I had not been sad in his presence before. So the king asked, okay, why does your face look so sad when you are not ill? This can be nothing but sadness of the heart. Okay, and the king suddenly notices his face, and he knows that there is deep trouble or distress in Nehemiah. Never ever before he had seen. Remember, just a little while before, Nehemiah had been praying that something should happen. Nehemiah doesn't even know how to open the conversation. Okay, so now God sets it up for him. So, what does the Bible say after that? I was very much afraid. Okay, that is why I put that thing, the day the goosebumps came. Okay, many times when we are suddenly frightened, I don't know the Hindi equivalent of it. Our skin becomes like an orange peel, with lot of projections, and the hair stands on its end. So here it was that kind of a reaction that came for Nehemiah. He was afraid, but I said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not look sad when the day where my ancestors, the city where my ancestors are buried lies in ruins and its gates have been destroyed by fire? Okay. So Nehemiah's concern, Ezra's concern was more for the people. Nehemiah's concern is also for the people, but he looks at a root cause, something else that was very important that was missing, because of which that condition came into being. Okay, so he is concerned that the gates and the city walls are gone. Okay, what is it that you want? The king asked. Then I prayed to God in heaven, and I answered, if it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in his sight, let him send me to the city in Judah where my ancestors are buried, so that I can rebuild it. It is that exact day in history which must be noted. Now Nehemiah is making an appeal. If it pleases you, okay, please send me to Jerusalem so that I can rebuild. Okay, what experience did he have for rebuilding a city? What was his job in the palace? He was serving food. He was good with food. He knew what is good food and bad food, what tastes good, what doesn't taste good, what is healthy, what is not healthy. Okay, what is junk food, all that he would have known. He was no expert in walls and buildings and other structures. Okay, but God had burdened him, and he makes an appeal, asking. He doesn't tell, send me some of the best architects of Persia with me so that I can go and get their help and get the things done. No, he says, let me go and let me rebuild. Okay, then the king, with the queen sitting beside him, said, how long you want to go? Okay, and when will you get back? Then it pleased the king to send me, so I set a time. When you read in subsequent chapters, you will notice that another 12 years would go. This is the 20th year of the king's reign. Later on, you will find that in the 32nd year of the king's reign, he will return back to Babylon. Okay, so a 12-year tenure. And if you read little further, you will notice that the king does not send him just like that. He makes him the governor of Jerusalem and sends him at that time with enough authorization for it. Okay, then in verse 7, Nehemiah makes a strange request. I said to him, if it pleases the king, may I have letters to the governors of Trans-Euphrates so that they will provide me safe conduct until I arrive to Judah. And may I have a letter to Asaph, keeper of the royal park, so he will give me timber for what? He will give him wood to make beams for the gates of the citadel, that is the palace by the temple, and for the city wall, and for the residence that he will occupy. So he asked for 2 letters, and these letters were given to him. Okay, and now it is important for us, even though we have seen that passage several times, Daniel chapter 9. Okay, maybe we can just very quickly look at it, verse 25. Okay, Daniel was told, know and understand this. From the time the word goes out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until the anointed one, the ruler, comes, there will be 7 sevens and 62 sevens. Okay, 69 weeks of years will be there from the time a letter goes out to rebuild Jerusalem. Okay, this is that letter which Nehemiah is carrying on his hand. The clock started. It is as if the stopwatch had started and the clock started ticking. From that day on, if you count, okay, you will know exactly when the Messiah will be cut off. A period just prior to that, the clock will stop when the Messiah will be cut off. Okay, so that 69 weeks of years will end, and it starts at this point, 444 BC. Okay, the Jewish calendar is 360 days. Okay, so make your calculations carefully if you want to. It's not a 365-day year, but it's a lunar calendar which they follow. So it is of 360 days. Okay, so he was carrying with him some awesome letters which triggered the calendar. Okay, when the Lord was coming on a colt into the city of Jerusalem, with people shouting Hosanna, children waving branches and people waving branches and putting their garments, okay, and blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. So many things. There was a messianic anticipation in Jerusalem. There were many other Jews, godly Jews, who did not consider Jesus as the Messiah, who were in other parts of the city where Jesus was not there, who were also on the streets, many of whom were saying, where is he who was to come? Okay, the king, the one whom Daniel had talked about, was on the way to Jerusalem, riding into Jerusalem, but the Jews missed it because they were looking for a different kind of Messiah. Okay, but this was an awesome letter that he was carrying. Okay, then in chapter 2 verse 10 we are told about an opposition which starts in Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite. Okay, so Ammonites and many others were living in the same place in Jerusalem, and opposition starts coming in that place to them. Then in verse 11 to 16, okay, some of these details we will have a look later on. Nehemiah makes an assessment of the task. Okay, he has reached Jerusalem. He assesses what needs to be done. Okay, there are some basic things that we can see. In verse 11, he says that he rested for 3 days. Okay, after arriving in Jerusalem, he rests for 3 days. Then in verse 12, he does not share his burden to the other people. First, he wants to look for himself. He had heard from Hanani, he had heard from the others, some news that had been coming into Persia, but now he had to see himself. Okay, so he takes one horse, okay, and then goes by night. Okay, he makes the assessment by night, and he goes around Jerusalem. Some places the walls have collapsed in such a way that he has no place to pass through. And he uses the outside, the valley side of the wall to go around and then comes back into the city. He has made a journey around the walls through the night. Okay, why night? Because he did not want to attract attention. But he made a very careful assessment of what needs to be done. Okay, even before he shared his burden with others. Okay, verse 16 also tells that same fact, that he had not shared with the others. Then in verse 17, he undertakes the next task. He appeals to the people who are now in Jerusalem of what they need to do. There are two things he points out. Jerusalem is in ruins. They knew it. Okay, the walls were down and nothing was being done about it. And he reminds them that the gates have been burnt with fire. Okay, then he motivates them. He says, come, let us rebuild the walls of Jerusalem. Okay, this is what marks a leader. Okay, and the rest. They stand out because of their burden, which comes from prayer and which comes from an inner stirring by the Lord. Okay, it is something that will make them do, even if no one comes. We sing, even if no one follows, I will follow Jesus. We sing it, but we don't do anything. We talk about it. अपना कलीसिया में ये होना चाहिए, वो होना चाहिए, ये नहीं हो रहा है, वो नहीं हो रहा है. No one is speaking to each other, no one is visiting each other. Many things we may speak, but when we feel burdened, we must challenge and motivate others to join us. We must share what is the true condition, and we must also show them the way ahead. Okay, then he also told them about how God had been with him. He gives his personal testimony. He was a cupbearer and he had come there as governor. Okay, and he was challenging them. This is how God's hand was there. Okay, there was no way he could have been in Jerusalem, no way he could have even thought about a work like this. But everything was possible because this work was in the mind and heart of God. And he talked about his personal testimony. Okay. Then in verse 7, the people it continues when he finishes this challenge. In verse 11, we are told, let us start rebuilding. So they began the good work. Okay. Verse 18, actually, it is the latter half of verse 18. Let us start rebuilding. So they began the good work. Okay. Verse 19, again, like in the earlier times, the locals, they start hearing about it. They start mocking. What sort of work you are doing? Are you rebelling against the king? They are trying to frighten the Jews. Okay. And then Nehemiah reminds the mockers about how they are God's unique people with a unique purpose on earth. Okay, so that message was for him, for the people, the Jews who had returned from exile, who were settled there, and for the locals who are there, who are going to witness the tremendous reconstruction that was taking place. In verse 20, this closing verse is there, of chapter 2. I answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. Okay, we, his servants, will start rebuilding. But as for you, you have no share in Jerusalem or any claim of historic rights to this city. Okay, so we will end with that. This is the beginning of the work that Nehemiah is doing. The subsequent chapters talk about the difficulties which they faced as they started constructing, the struggles with finances, the hardships, the opposition, and the joy of seeing the walls erected completely. And then another revival breaks in Jerusalem. And this time around, both Ezra and Nehemiah are there together ministering God's word to the people and rebuilding the people with the defenses in place, their unique identity restored, their separation from their neighbors restored, what is belonging to the things of God and what is belonging to the world separated very clearly and marked off with a boundary. Okay, they begin a new life in a new chapter rather in the Jewish history. Okay, we will end with that for today.